Since childhood, the family company office, Lawson Builders, felt like my second home. An old two-story building in the suburbs carrying the scent of fresh wood and neat papers. The phones always rang, conversations about work echoed, footsteps on the stone floor, all part of the soundtrack of my life. My father, Richard Lawson, was a hard-working and determined man who dreamed of building a small empire. I was by his side from childhood. When phones rang, I answered, and when clients arrived, I reviewed reports. With every client compliment about my professionalism, my father smiled and said, "Maya, one day this company will be yours." That sentence was a life promise for me, and I devoted all of myself to it. Years passed. I completed my education diligently, business management with a focus on construction projects. After graduation, I had several offers from big companies, but none appealed to me because deep down I knew my place was here, alongside my family and our partnership. My first day at work after university was full of anxiety and hope. I opened the office, smelled new papers and wood desks, arranged my workspace, and prepared to prove myself. From that day, I was the first to arrive every morning and the last to leave every night. Phone calls, continuous emails, back-to-back meetings, and endless projects became part of my life. My personal life faded away. Friendships weakened, romantic relationships ended one by one, and vacations were limited to a few hours of napping in the office. But I endured it all because I believed all these sacrifices were for a future that would be mine. Until my brother Jake returned. He had a very different world, a world of travel, art, and freedom, trips across Europe, days full of discovery and new experiences. His life was carefree, away from office pressures and projects. That day he returned, the family warmly welcomed him. My father, without hesitation, created a position for him as creative director, a place where he could focus on new ideas and marketing without needing to work hard. What about me? I had worked tirelessly for 12 years, put in hours of effort, and never taken a day off. I felt I was slowly being sidelined, but I still knew nothing. The whole story was just beginning. 2 years had passed, and every day I felt the distance between Jake and me growing. Jake was increasingly absorbed in the world of art and marketing, while I was increasingly entangled in the operations I had built. My work was serious, tracking contracts, managing projects, coordinating with different teams, and maintaining relationships with key clients. But Jake spent most of his time in short meetings, long lunches, and attending festivals and galleries. Sometimes when we were together, we spoke with surface smiles, but the space between us was cold and empty. I knew he had a bigger share than he had earned, but I had never said a word. One day, during a meeting where I was presenting all the details of the large Anderson construction project, Jake was pacing the hallway and answering his phone. When the meeting ended, he looked at me and said, "You're taking this too seriously, Maya. Take a break." I replied coldly, "You don't know what it takes behind this hard work." Maybe if I had stayed quiet and sat aside, everything would have gone more smoothly. But I was not that person. I was after my right, the future they had promised me. One day when I returned to the office, I noticed a change in the company atmosphere. Private meetings between my father and Jake, changes in staff behavior, and a silence about the company's future hung over everyone. Something in my heart began to break, but I still didn't know what awaited me. That Friday morning, like always, I went to the office with a sense of responsibility and seriousness. But this time, something in the air I couldn't ignore. A thick official folder was on my desk, labeled Ownership Transfer. My hands froze as I opened it. Line by line, I read the document. 70% of the company's shares had been transferred to Jake. My name was nowhere to be found. For a moment, everything blurred. My heart pounded louder and louder. My hands trembled, and the air felt thinner. How could this be? Why had no one told me? I, who had worked all these years, put everything in, believing this future was mine. That day, holding the document, I left the office, my heart full of anger, despair, and confusion. Could I bear this betrayal? Did they really want to push me aside? That night, when the family gathered around the dinner table, I placed the document in the middle, eyes fixed on me. My voice shook but was loud. Why was I kept in the dark about this? My father looked coldly and said, this was a decision made for the company's future. The fire of anger flared inside me. Where is my future? 12 years of relentless work mean nothing. My mother tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. We love you, but these were tough decisions. That night, I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I hid my tears and told myself, I can't keep playing this game. The next morning, my room was dark and silent. I felt the whole world pressing down on my shoulders. I started packing my things, though I didn't want to believe this was the end of my story. Years of life, every moment, my efforts, turned into bitter memories in minutes. Writing my resignation letter, I felt both freedom and deep fear. Had I made the right decision? What would my future be? Days passed, no news from family or office, but the phone started ringing. Important clients, projects in danger, pending contracts. My father called repeatedly. With a pleading tone, he said, Maya, you are the only one who can control this crisis. Come back. But I was no longer the person they could easily call back. I thought about my rights, about my future, not a destroyed past. After that bitter day when I saw the ownership transfer document, not only my future, but my heart was broken. The family I thought were my support now felt like strangers. Each of them was beside me and yet distant. With my mother, Linda, my relationship became more complicated than ever. She always tried to play the peacemaker, but I felt she took my father and Jake's side more. Once, when we were alone in the kitchen, tears gathered in her eyes. She said, Maya, we love you. Believe me, none of us wanted it to be this way. I replied with a trembling voice, how is it possible when I worked 12 years and now I am sidelined? A heavy silence settled between us, full of unsaid words. With Jake, my brother, our relationship was full of jealousy and unspoken things. He always tried to calm the atmosphere with smiles and simple talk, but I knew beneath that smile was hidden fear. Once, sitting by the window, I said, do you really think you can take my place? He replied softly, no, Maya. I will never take your place. I just wanted a share. But for me, that share had come at the cost of my removal. Among this emotional storm, my friends became my refuge. A friend I had been away from for years, Allison, was the only one I could talk to openly. On nights I cried relentlessly. She was there, listening without judgment. Meanwhile, someone entered my life. Nathan, an engineer I had met on one of the projects. He was not only soothing, but made me regain confidence in myself. One night, sitting in a cafe, he said, Maya, you are the strongest person I know. You shouldn't let anyone hurt you this much. His words were like balm on my old wounds. These complex and turbulent relationships became part of my healing process. While life outside home and office went on, inside me a battle began to rebuild trust and love. Every morning when I woke up, I told myself today would be the day things get better. But by evening, the same heavy and cold feeling took over me again. I was lost among broken pieces of hope and self-confidence. The mirror in front of me was the only witness to my tears and hollow smiles. Sometimes I wished I could talk to that 10-year-old girl who used to play under my father's desk, to tell her the path was tough, but she must be strong, that no one should ever diminish her value, not even her family. One day, alone with my mother Linda, sitting on the old living room couch, she took a deep breath and said, "I know it's hard, Maya, but sometimes life has its own path." I replied, my voice heavy with emotion, "But I still don't know my way. I worked all those years, but now it feels like I have nothing." A few days later, I faced Jake. He calmly said, "I always thought you were so strong, Maya." But now I realize we were both alone. You in the office, me in my own world. Tears welled in his eyes, the ones he never wanted to show. I also cried silently, without saying a word. Amid all this, Nathan remained my rock. One day when anxiety and worries peaked, he smiled and said, "You shouldn't carry this heavy burden alone. Let me help you." His presence was calming, but I still had fears I couldn't let go of. These relationships each healed a small part of my wounds. With every conversation, every look, and every smile, I took a step towards recovery. But the path was still long, and I had only just begun. It was early morning. Soft sunlight streamed through my office window. I slowly sipped my coffee and looked at the pile of papers and emails on my desk. After all those years of effort, everything now hung on a thin line. On one side, continuing at Lawson Builders with all its pain and hardships, and on the other side, an unexpected offer from our old rival, Westfield Construction. A phone call from Garrett Westfield, CEO of the rival company, echoed in my mind. "Maya, we've always believed in your abilities. We want to offer you the position you deserve: balanced hours, good salary, and a stake in management." But my heart trembled. I knew accepting this offer meant cutting all ties with my family, with the history always in my mind. But staying meant continuing in a company that felt like it was cutting my roots. The resignation letter I sent weeks ago was still on the CEO's desk, but maybe now I had to rethink it. The decision I had to make was not just a job choice, but a choice between loyalty to the past or rebuilding the future. At the same time, my father and Jake called with serious and worried faces. Once seeming to have everything under control, now worried about losing major clients. Anderson Construction and Westridge Development were two big clients who depended on my attention and skills. My father said on the phone, "Maya, this is a chance to make things right. We're ready to give you a share, more responsibilities, and the job you deserve." But I was no longer that simple girl. In a calm but firm voice, I replied, "Dad, the game has changed. I'm not just responsible for projects. I want a share that reflects the value of my efforts. 40% ownership and a board seat. These are my terms." A long silence followed, but that silence was the start of a major negotiation. I sat in the big meeting room, the heavy wooden table under my hands, making the responsibility feel even heavier. My father, Jake, my mother, and our family lawyer were all present. The air was tense. everyone waiting for me to start. In a firm and confident voice, I said, "My terms are clear: 40% ownership, an official seat on the board, reasonable working hours with vacation time. I want a share that shows that these years I wasn't just a worker, but a real partner in this company." My father frowned and said, "That's too much for a newcomer partner. Jake owns 70%, and your mother and I keep the remaining 30%. Where do you fit in?" Jake added with a tired look, "I'm willing to transfer 35% of my share to Maya. I don't want to fight. I want us to be family, but there are limits." I smiled and replied, 35% is a good start, but I need 40%. That difference shows the value I have created over the years. Hours passed. The debates grew heated, each of us telling our story, putting facts and feelings on the table. My mother tried to calm the atmosphere. "We are all family here, aiming for a better future. Let's put aside these disputes." But I knew that for this peace, I first had to get my rights, and that was the first step. Late at night, a preliminary agreement was formed. 35% of Jake's shares would be transferred to me. I would have a board seat. Working hours would be reasonably set, and new policies for holidays and work-life balance were accepted. This was the beginning of a new path, but much remained before everything settled peacefully. The first day I stepped back into the office, I felt a strange and different sensation. My office had changed, larger windows installed, a new desk with a modern design, and a cozy corner for small meetings, symbolizing a fresh start away from the tense past. Colleagues looked at me with curiosity and some caution. The atmosphere had changed from that stressful and exhausting environment to a place filled with hope. My first meeting was with Jake. Respectfully but honestly, I said, "We need to clarify our roles. You are responsible for creative direction and client relations, and I will manage operations and finances." He nodded and gave a faint smile. "I think we can perform better if we work together." Days passed, and I was able to implement operational plans I had always envisioned. Project timelines improved, costs were controlled, and employees felt the workload pressure ease. But new challenges arrived too. Some clients were still suspicious of changes. Competitors lurked, and sometimes doubt whispered in my ear. "Can you really succeed this time?" In my personal life, major changes occurred too. Nathan remained my supporter. With him, I felt I could laugh again, live, and experience love. One night in the park under the moonlight, holding his hand, I said, "You helped me find myself again." He smiled and said, "And I will always be by your side." But shadows of the past still hung over us. My mother and father occasionally tried to mend the relationship, and I took a step back each time, not out of hatred, but self-protection. This was a new beginning, full of hope and challenges, a path not yet finished, but I was ready to take the next steps. Months after restarting, we faced new daily challenges. One of the biggest crises was the major Anderson construction project, which, due to management changes and client worries, was on the verge of cancellation. The phone call from Maxwell Anderson, CEO of the client company, still rang in my ears. "Maya, I have serious concerns about project management. Why is everything so chaotic?" Calm but determined, I replied, "Mr. Anderson, changes have been made to improve the project. We have a strong and committed team, and I personally oversee it." But the reality was Jake was still inexperienced in project management, and clients depended on my expertise. I had to help Jake reach the expected level and save the project from collapse. The next challenge was managing internal conflicts. Disagreements between Jake and me over marketing strategies and company development escalated. Board meetings sometimes turned into scenes of heated arguments and family disputes. One day, after a tough meeting, Jake approached and said, "I know you're tough, but we need to find a way to be together." I replied, "The only way is together, but we must accept our responsibilities." Meanwhile, my relationship with Nathan grew stronger. He was my unwavering support and stood by me in the hardest moments. At nights, I sometimes stared at the ceiling anxiously and wondered, can I handle this pressure? Is the future bright? But each time my inner voice answered, "You are stronger than you think. Keep going." Months passed, and my relentless efforts gradually paid off. The Anderson construction project, once on the brink of cancellation, was progressing well under our careful management and replanning. Maxwell Anderson no longer had past concerns and had full trust in our team. At a team meeting, Maxwell said to me, "Maya, you've proven you're a real manager. We're lucky to have you." That sentence, despite all pressures and hardships, felt like a great reward. Not only existing projects, but new contracts also came our way. With Jake, now more professional in his role, we targeted new markets and proposed innovative company development plans. Employees felt they were working in a supportive and dynamic environment. Work-life balance improved, and our new work culture encouraged participation and creativity. In a board meeting, my proposal to expand into residential markets was welcomed. This was a turning point showing the company was not only rebuilding but moving forward. Among all these successes, my relationship with Nathan deepened and became more meaningful. His support gave me strength not only in my personal life, but also professionally. Nights were no longer filled with worry, but excitement for the good things ahead. Looking at my new office, I felt I had built not just a workspace, but a home to rebuild myself. Large windows let in light, and the desk I proudly looked at symbolized my power and independence. Sitting in the boardroom next to Jake and my father, the space once filled with conflict and doubt was now calm and full of mutual respect. My mother, with a smile tinged with a little sadness, looked at me. But true ownership was beyond share percentages. True ownership meant knowing your worth, standing up for your rights, and rebuilding life based on that value. One night, sitting with Nathan on the balcony watching the sky, I said, "This is just the beginning, but now I feel I can breathe." He smiled and said, "And wherever you go, I'll be by your side." My story is the story of thousands who must fight for themselves in family, work, and life. They may fall, they may face betrayal, but true strength is in rising and rebuilding. So, what will you do? Will you stand and fight? Or will you carve a new path? My story doesn't end here because life never ends. And maybe this ending is the start of something bigger. If this story gave you strength, like, subscribe, and share your story with me. Knowing your worth is your right. Never forget it. If you want, I can also help create a formatted text file or any other version you need.